This episode of the Focus Action Results podcast is brought to you by Accelerate Performance, creators of the Focus Action Results course and the FAR Planner. Welcome to the podcast that promises you'll be much more productive with me, your host, Ralph Varco. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Focus Action Results podcast with me, Ralph Varco. And thank you for joining me for this episode, which is all about the BHAG. The B what? The B who? I hear you say. The BHAG. It stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. Some of you will have heard about it before and some won't. So this episode is dedicated to looking at the BHAG. I'll explain what it is, where it came from, how it relates to business, and then we'll look at how this can relate to you and your pursuit of goals. First things first, let's look at what a BHAG is. As I said, it is a big, hairy, audacious goal. So where did it come from? Well, it's related to business, and there were two people, Jim Collins and Jerry Porras, who undertook a 6-year study. They looked at 18 companies. These are 18 exceptional companies, and they wanted to understand what it was that made them different. They looked at these 18 companies and they compared them to companies that were their competition. They looked at the companies from the moment that they were born as startups through to becoming mid-market organizations and then large corporations. And they wanted to see what made them different. So this was a real study of exceptional numbers of data points and looking at these things. And they were able to see that those truly exceptional organizations were those that had a big, hairy, audacious goal. Bit of a funny name for it, but it's a bit like thinking about a vision statement, right? So you may have seen companies that have got a vision statement. You may have read an annual report. I know many people haven't, and sometimes they're quite interesting, but other times they're just not. They're quite long. But a company annual report will often have a vision statement. When I went to business school, we looked at a model which was called VMOST. It was vision, mission, objective, strategy, and tactics. So everything spans from the vision about what the company wants to be. Then it has a mission to go out and do what it does. Then there are some objectives that get set, which are to sell lots or to have certain number of customers or get revenue through the door, profit targets, those sorts of things. Then it would be broken down into the strategies, which are, what market you're going after, what products you're going to sell, and the strategies to take things to market. Then down to the tactics. So each individual action that will be taken in order that the company can drive what it needs to drive to achieve its ambition of the objectives and upwards to the mission and the vision. Actually, that's not that different from you setting yourself your own goals. You have, as we've talked about before and we'll look at, and I look at in Accelerate Personal Performance book and also the Focus Action Results course and the FAR Planner, we look at the fact that you have what I call the ultimate goal, and then you break those down into process steps or process goals. And if you think about it, the ultimate goal is stating what you want to do. Then you break it down into smaller tactical actions that will get you to achieve the results you want to achieve. Well, you can think about the strategy being the overarching, how you're going to do something, and then the tactics being the sub-actions, the process steps that enable you to get there. So this is applicable to your existence and what you're trying to do in your personal goals and your personal achievements of success, and it's applicable to companies as well. So let's get back to the BHAG itself. So the Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal, this was written up in a book that was produced in 1994 called Built to Last. It's a great book. About 370 odd pages. It's definitely worth a read because there are huge numbers of examples in that book, and we'll talk about some of those examples here today. There was also an article that was written. It was in the Harvard Business Review magazine in the September to October edition in 1996 that was called Building Your Company's Vision. So as I say, vision, it's like a vision statement. except they called it a big, hairy, audacious goal, or a BHAG. It just sounds a bit cooler than a vision, just a vision. Right, so there are a number of things relating to this. It needs to be big. It needs to be hairy. It needs to be audacious, and it's a goal, clearly. So big. Make it something that is really significant. Not just a smallish goal that you think, well, I can probably get that, but make it really big. And then actually make it bigger still by making it hairy. Well, what do they mean by hairy? Well, make it a bit scary. Make it something that is not instantly achievable. What's the point in setting yourself a really decent goal to go after if you're pretty certain that you're going to be able to get there? Make it something that's bigger. Make it something that's hairy. You've really got to work at it. There's a chance you're not going to hit it. So you could say, well, what's the point in setting a goal I can't hit? Well, because it stretches you. Jack Welch, former CEO of GE, talked about how he would get the teams to set their own goals and then to stretch them even further. And in the stretching even further, the company and all the various different teams within the company ended up achieving more than they would have done if they had only set the initial goal. So if you set a goal and then you stretch it even further, you might not hit that stretch. But what you will do is you'll hit more than the initial goal that you'd have set. So that's why you want to make this a big goal. You want to make it hairy, not something that you're going to be able to necessarily hit really easy or really quickly. It's going to require work. And it's something that's audacious. It's bold. It's a bold statement. It's a vision which people can get around. Let's look at an example or two. In 1964, there was an organization which was called Blue Ribbon Sports. It was set up at the University of Oregon by a track athlete called Phil Knight and his coach. They essentially resold the Japanese shoes, and they sold those out of the back of the car at track events. Well, in 1971, the relationship between Blue Ribbon Sports and the Japanese shoemaker was nearing an end, and Knight prepared to launch his own line of footwear. So what he thought of was, well, what can I do to create something around this that everybody can align around in the organization? He renamed the company Nike after the Greek goddess of victory. And as we all know, it's a household name. There was an activity that happened within the organization to align around some brand new name. And there are different categories of BHAGs, one of which is around internal transformation. And this is exactly what that was. Get people aligned around a new name, a new purpose, a new vision. Got them all enthused. But he went further than that. He said, what do we need to do to make ourselves from this small organization that had just been reselling some Japanese shoes into an organization that is actually controlling our own destiny and is growing? So he set about putting a BHAG in place, which was simply to crush Adidas. Now, Adidas is still going strong today. And they're a big force in the sportswear market, in the running shoe market. So they haven't crushed them, but what they have done is Nike has become a household name themselves by setting a really powerful, big, hairy, audacious goal. So that's one example. Now, Jim Collins and Jerry Porras say in their book that a true BHAG, and I'm quoting here, is clear and compelling and serves as a unifying focal point of effort, often creating immense team spirit. It has a clear finish line so the organization can know when it's achieved the goal, and people like to shoot for finish lines. A BHAG engages people, it reaches out and grabs them in the gut. It is tangible, energizing, highly focused. People get it right away, and it should take little or no explanation. We'll talk about a few examples later on in the current organisations that are out there and that are big that you'll all know and love. But let's look at some of the ones that they talk about in their book. So Ford in the early 1900s said they were going to democratise the automobile. Sony in the early 1950s, though Sony being a Japanese company, and Japanese products at the time were known as being a bit cheap and nasty. So they set themselves a BHAG, which was to become the company that most changes the worldwide image of Japanese products as being of poor quality. Honda in the 1970s came out and said, we will crush, squash and slaughter Yamaha. So that was a little bit like Nike saying that they were going to crush Adidas. Microsoft set out a vision in the 1980s, and that vision was to make sure that people had a desktop on every a computer desktop on every home in the world. And that's what they effectively set out to do, and that's what they've done. Bill Gates said we had dreams about the impact we could have. We talked about a computer on every desk in every home. It's been amazing to see so much of that dream become a reality and touch so many lives. I never imagined what an incredible and important company would spring from those original ideas. Bill Gates said that in 2006 in Redmond in Washington. As we go on, we look and we see that there are really great examples of General Electric. So I mentioned Jack Welch, and General Electric was very clear, and they said to become the number one or number two in every market that they serve and revolutionize the company to have the speed and agility of a small enterprise. They were not a small enterprise, they were huge. They had many different divisions, but what they wanted to be was agile so that they could serve their customers quickly and easily. Now, if you compare that to one of their competitors, Westinghouse said, they effectively had 6 points that they were aspiring to. And those points were bullet points: total quality, market leadership, technology driven, global, focused growth, and diversified. Well, I mean, it's fine. Total quality, great, get that. You want market leadership, brilliant. It's technology driven, it says what it is. They are global. But it's not an all-encompassing statement about what they want to be. It's not a goal either. So to say I want to become the number one or number two in every market that we serve is a goal. Now what that BHAG lacks is a time frame around it, and we've talked about, and we'll talk in future episodes about the importance of having a time frame, because otherwise your goal doesn't actually meet the SMART objectives. But as a BHAG, it's excellent because everybody in the company knows that that is what we're attempting to be. Number one or number two in every market. Now, I mentioned that there are some types of big, hairy, audacious goals. They broadly split into 4 categories. The first one of which is something that is target orientated. So you clearly set a defined quantitative or qualitative goal. Walmart, as an example here, set a goal which is to become a $125 billion company by the year 2000. Then there's the competitive BHAG, and we've talked about 2 examples of that already. Nike and Honda wanting to destroy Yamaha. The third example is a role model BHAG, where you're trying to mimic the traits of other successful companies that may be outside your immediate competition. For example, people might say that they want to be the Nike of their industry. I worked for a time in a company called Now AI, provides a a set of sales intelligence, dynamic intelligence reports for people and companies that are selling into and wanting to understand and know their customers better. And the founder of Now AI would often say, I want to be the Spotify of the business intelligence world. Right? So there's a big vision around that. So everything that the organization then did was clearly aligned to becoming like Spotify. They're an exemplar of how you disrupt an industry, how you go from being an industry where you would buy a track and download it and then you listen to it as many times as you like, to being a disruptor who has said, on a subscription basis, you can listen to whatever you want to listen to for a fixed monthly fee. Totally disrupted the market. And he wanted to do that and to set that as a vision for his company. The fourth type of a BHAG is an internal transformation. So Rockwell in 1995 said they wanted to transform the company from a defense contractor into the best diversified high technology company in the world. We already mentioned that to rebrand, as Blue Ribbon Sports did to Nike, is actually an internal transformation of sorts, and it enables people to really come around something that the organization is doing. And so there is another example. I'll give you a few more. Google, to organize the world's information. Facebook, to connect the world. Uber, transportation as reliable as running water, everywhere for everyone. And thankfully, Uber Eats was born out of that as well, the ability to get anything you want to eat, anywhere you want it, at any time. An absolute lifesaver during the COVID pandemic lockdown. And then there is Tesla. So Elon Musk and his crew, they want to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. The Alibaba Group, to make easy to do business anywhere. You'll remember that I talked about Evernote when I was doing the rundown of all the productivity apps and tools, and I said that I extensively use Evernote. And Evernote's icon is an elephant. Elephants never forget. And their BHAG is to remember everything. Then SpaceX is to enable human exploration and settlement on Mars. And we already mentioned Microsoft with a computer on every desk in every home, and Nike crushing Adidas. As you see, all of these relate to businesses. And you could be sitting there thinking, but how does that relate to me? I mean, I can see how putting a BHAG in place where it's really easy to get from the moment you read it or you hear it, you just get what it is that the organization's trying to do and how they're trying to mobilize things. But I'm an individual. I don't have employees. I don't have customers. I don't have other people that are looking at me for leadership. So I don't really need to have a BHAG. Why would I need to have my own BHAG? Well, it's for the same reason that I mentioned before. When you're setting yourself your goals, what you want to achieve, if you just simply say, I want to run, as an example, and I know this doesn't work for everybody because not everybody wants to, but just say that is your goal. Just go with it for a moment, right? Say you want to run, and you start to go through a process of going out running occasionally, and you may get fitter. You may do quite well. And it's a little bit like me. I was like, okay, I could barely run a kilometre. I was wheezing by the time I got to the other end of the kilometre mark on this particular route that I used to go. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to do anything better than that. So watching the London Marathon one day on my television, sitting there in my armchair, cup of coffee in hand, donut in the other, looking at them thinking, God, tell you what, I don't know why anybody would want to do that. Bloody hell. I mean, I can barely run a bath. I can hardly run, a kilometre, and I'm wheezing after that. So I'm never going to be able to do anything like that. And I looked at it and I thought, but you know, why not? They can do it. Those thousands of people running through the streets of London can. Why couldn't I? Well, I could. I just need to set it as a goal. So I kind of came up with my own BHAG. It was a big, hairy and audacious goal. I'd never run further than about 3 kilometres before I decided that I was going to do it. Some might say that's completely bonkers. Actually, I think I'd say it was completely bonkers too. But I set myself a BHAG. It was big, 26.2 miles, and I could barely do 2. Pretty big. Audacious, definitely. Hairy, oh my God, yes. It scared the living bejesus out of me because I was just like, I just don't understand how anybody could do it. But I set the goal and I set a time scale for it, right? The time scale was a year from the day that I was sitting there with coffee and donut in hand. And I went ahead and contacted the NSPCC and asked them if I could have one of their charity spaces, and they said yes, but I'd need to raise £2,000 or £2,500, something like that. And I said, okay, well, I reckon I could do that. I can tap up all my friends. And I did, and I raised more than I needed to. But I set that goal. There was a time scale to it. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, I need to really put a plan in place now. And that plan needs to look at things like nutrition and training schedule and buying Lycra and wearing Lycra on a daily basis. Okay, never done that before. Middle-aged man in Lycra, not a great look. Really, I mean, even when you're quite fit and you're not, you haven't had your middle-age spread all over the place, which frankly I did when I started. But, even without middle-age spread, middle-aged man in Lycra, really, really not a nice look. And it's funny that, you kind of get obsessed, and I'm going off the point here, but you get obsessed about how you're sort of into your running and how you're doing all your training, and, it's all really good. You're really proud of the fact that you've done a marathon or you've run a long way. And so, you post photographs. Oh my God, you post photographs of yourself wearing Lycra on social media. Whatever happened to this whole thing that we now tell our kids, just make sure you you don't put stuff on social media that you wouldn't be happy to have out there, because it'll be out there forever. So if anybody's inclined, and I really suggest you don't do this, you can probably find pictures of me in Lycra. Ooh. Anyway, where was I? Yes, so I set myself all these goals, right? I had to buy supplements. I had to buy things, I didn't have to, but I thought, well, why not? Buy things so that I could take these sort of protein shakes after I had been running, so I could build my muscles. Didn't really work. Still don't have muscles. But and then take these other little things which would help me to get fitter. Apparently, they claim that you can reduce your lactic acid. Absolutely no idea whether they work or not. But something in me said, oh, well, I might as well buy them. I might as well take them. So I would set all these different little goals. But it was all so that I could run London Marathon and I could raise money for the NSPCC in the process. None of that would have happened if I hadn't sat there and said, do you know what? I'm going to put in place a big, hairy, audacious goal for myself. Something that I had a significant chance of not achieving, because I was unfit. I was the wrong side of 40 when I started running. And I'd been asthmatic as a child, so I couldn't even run. Every time I tried to run when I was at school, I would literally be wheezing on the floor. So I couldn't. Anyway, there you go. And it was a great experience. I have to say, ranking up there with the birth of my daughter as one of the most emotional and special experiences of my life, as you run as part of this sea of humanity through the streets of London, knowing that it's the largest mass participation fundraising event on the planet, people running for their own reasons and for various different charitable causes. It was just an astonishing experience. Not for everybody, but it was amazing for me. The BHAG that you set for yourself can only feel like it's maximum 70% achievable, right? I said that it needed to be hairy, it's scary, and it's audacious. It needs to be something that you're not certain of being able to complete. I had absolutely no idea if I could do the training over the 3 months or whatever it was that you do as you build up to a marathon. I had absolutely no idea. Didn't know. I knew that I had willpower, determination. I was very organised. I had rode quite successfully, so I knew that I could do fitness stuff despite being an asthmatic. It's great what drugs can do to control those sorts of things. And in fact, some of the Tour de France, I think Chris Froome is an asthmatic. He takes a Ventolin inhaler, and he's won the Tour de France. So it's perfectly possible for people who have asthma to be able to do that. And so I didn't know whether I was going to be able to, but I set it as a goal. It was clear, it was compelling. I anchored my goal to a bigger and higher purpose. Yes, it would be great to complete the marathon, to go over the finish line, to get the medal, the photograph of me in Lycra, which I could then post out to the world, to really offend everybody's eyeballs. But more than that, I was raising money for children who were being abused, children who were being bullied. I mean, what an amazing charity NSPCC is. And I felt like, it was a humble experience to raise money for them in order that they could help children. So there was a bigger purpose. And as I went through the process and I did the training, I always kept coming back to what's the bigger purpose? Why is it that I'm putting myself through this hell in order to reach this BHAG that I set myself? Well, I got a number of things out of it. The NSPCC got their money. I felt amazing at having achieved it. I felt absolutely bloody awful for about a week afterwards because it was just painful. And, the body isn't designed for most people to run 26.2 miles. It just isn't. And that's why it's a real test and a challenge. But, I got that out of it. I lost a load of fat, so I was looking good, but still not good enough to wear Lycra and to post those onto social media. And I got a whole bunch of other things out of it besides. But I'll come down to this. It is a big, hairy, audacious goal. Now, in the world of business, it's a goal which is probably of a long-term, 10-year plus vision. Right? You don't get to crush Adidas overnight. You don't get to put a computer on the desktop in every household overnight. It takes time. Okay, but as an individual, you're going to do things which are BHAGs over a shorter time frame. A year is still a reasonable time frame. And it expanded my ability to do things. And it made me think, well, if I can achieve that, then I can achieve other things besides. As I come to a conclusion here, I would just say to you, think about your own BHAG. You can just have one of them. You could have two, you could have three, never more than three. Remember, 3 is the magic number. And remember that we heard from Francois on that on our last episode. Still getting over that. And 3 is the magic number, no more than 3, but set yourself a BHAG. Really stretch. Think about what your goal could be and then try and stretch it further. How can you achieve more than that? Set your goal a little bit further than that. You might not hit it. It doesn't matter actually if you hit it, because it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Or you're going to go, oh my God, what are you talking about? It's not about the destination. You talk about setting goals, Ralph, and hitting the goals, and making sure that you get to hit the goal, and then celebrating when you hit the goal. Absolutely. Yes, because that's what you're trying to achieve. But when you stretch, when you've got a BHAG and you're really stretching beyond what you think is possible, right? Just remember that your goal would have been X, and you're saying you want to try for X plus 30% or whatever, okay? Your goal really was X, and you set X plus 30%, and say you only get to X plus 20%. That's still 20% more than the goal that you would have set yourself if you hadn't set your BHAG. Setting BHAGs is a really good way to make sure that you are driving yourself a little bit further, achieving things more than you thought were possible before. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode about BHAGs, and I look forward to seeing you, speaking to you again on the next episode of the Focus Action Results podcast. I hope that was helpful for you today and you enjoyed listening to the Focus Action Results podcast. If it was either helpful or enjoyable, or heaven forbid both, please subscribe, leave feedback, share with friends and family, and tweet it loud with the hashtag Focus Action Results podcast.